Good morning, good afternoon, good night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us to the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, I'm here so happy to host this talk by our very special guest, Jon Santos. John will be discussing race, waves, mediums, mind. Before we turn over to John, I would like to do a short opening prayer. So I invite all of us to please take a moment to perhaps close our eyes and connect with God, connect with all the beneficent spirits, our mentors, guardian angels, all of those that are here today, inspiring this work, inspiring all of us who came to the live or afterwards, and especially inspire our friend John with insights and inspirations of peace, of harmony. So be it. John, thank you so much. It's so good to have you here today. Welcome. We hope you and your family are doing well. It is so good to have you here to discuss such a quite relevant topic, right? Science. As John will remind us today, scientists have become today's priests of the spirit. And I would say without desiring or even being aware of it, right? But it's very interesting. He will be discussing about our minds and how, according to Spiritism, right, the rays that we emit, our own spiritual dwellings will rise within our wave of the thoughts preferred by our souls. It is amazing, John, to put this in such a very scientific viewpoint of what Jesus said, to each according to his deeds. So, with that, I would say thank you, John, for being here today. And I would just say before John starts speaking and enlighten us with this, to me, very interesting topic, please allow me to introduce him. John, Jon Santos has been a friend, but he's also been involved with Spiritism for more than 15 years. He is an active member of SEIR Atlanta. He is a volunteer at Spiritist Radio. Professionally, John, not surprisingly, is a telecommunications engineer. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with his wife, Silvia, and their daughter, Sophia. And before we move on, I just wanted to remind everyone, please send your questions, send your comments using the chat window. John will reserve time to address all your comments or your questions once he finishes his discussion. Now, John, please take it away, and thank you.
So first of all, I'd like to thank the United Spiritist Federation for this opportunity of being here today, speaking to all of you. I also thank you for selecting Marcia to be the host, because as she mentioned, we're longtime friends. You know, she used to live here in Atlanta, and now she went to the great state of Tennessee, to help spread Spiritism over there as well. So, without further ado, today we're going to talk about rays, waves, mediums, and minds. This this topic basically comes from the book In the Realms of Mediumship, that is from Chico Xavier and Andrea Luiz, the spirit Andrea Luiz. And this is an introduction that was written by Emmanuel on that book. What is interesting to me, and I'll just leave it out there for you to do your own research and let me know if you find out something that I don't know. But this message, it was written on October 3rd, 1954, which is exactly 150 years from Allan Kardec's birth. Allan Kardec, the codifier of the basic works of Spiritism. He was born on October 3rd, 1804. So Emmanuel, in this message, in this introduction, he starts by saying, in his study the composition of matter, the 20th century, science has gone from surprise to surprise, causing it to revive long held beliefs. And he's going to talk to us about the advances of science, especially around the atom, just for us to understand that science's advances and that what we used to believe is no longer uh, true, is no longer believable. We all know that when it comes to matter. So he tells us that almost 5 centuries before Christ, Democritus' teacher, Leucippus, theorized that everything was composed of infinitesimal particles, atoms, that were in constant motion. In spite of all of this, the classical culture continued to be based on the four principles of Aristotle's thought: water, earth, air, and fire, or the three elements of ancient alchemists: sulfur, salt, and mercury, in order to explain the many combinations of physical world. Well, nowadays we know that the combinations are based of atoms, right? So it always started in Greece with a philosopher coming up with a model or a theory, but from a philosophical perspective. And then it took some centuries, right? So it came in 19th century when Dalton scientifically for the first time proposed the corpuscular theory of matter, and highly respectable scholars begin a period of investigation, renewing ideas and concepts based on the so-called indivisible particle, right, the atom. So there were extraordinary discoveries that open up and grand horizons to human knowledge. Crookes, as we see in the below image, discovers the radiant state of matter, and he studies cathode rays. Thanks to him, some of us, or many of us, had the television in our homes. And that's why it was called CRT, right? Cathodic ray tube. And that's where also the name of that application website, YouTube, comes from, because it's you inside the tube. It's making that analogy. But thanks to Crookes, we had our first televisions. And many of us, when we were younger, we had that type of televisions in our homes as opposed to LED or plasma TVs. And then Röntgen observes that invisible radiation passed through Crookes' tube wrapped in a black cardboard and discovers the X-ray. So thanks to Röntgen, we have the X-ray that helps us so much nowadays. And then Henri Becquerel, he was amazed by the subject, and he does some experiments with uranium while looking for radiations, and then he finds that there is something more to research. So, and what happens is that Pierre and Marie Curie, or the Curie couple, they were intrigued by this enigma, and they analyzed tons of pitch blende, and they discover radium, the radium element. So old scientific foundations or affirmations, they tremble. So, and then comes Rutherford later on and Bohr, both in the forefront, leading group of pioneers and beginning prominent studies involving radioactivity and coming up with a new model for the atom. As we saw earlier, for Dalton, it was just like a ball, a solid ball. That was the model for atom. And then Rutherford and Bohr, they evolved that model. So the atom experiences an attack against its fortress, if you will. It started as a solid ball to then turn into what we know nowadays, of having its nucleus and having electrons around it. So, and then it hides secrets. then they are entrusted to humankind. As much as we study our atoms, more we learn about ourselves. So then, ever since the last quarter of the 19th century, the Earth has become a kingdom of waves and rays, currents and vibrations. Everything pulsates with electricity and magnetism, movement and attraction. And also, the study of cosmic rays has demonstrated the fantastic energies scattered throughout the universe, providing physicists with powerful instruments for investigating atomic and subatomic phenomena. So Planck and Einstein, they also construct a new and grand concepts also held by Bohr. So as we see throughout the centuries, Adam has a history of evolution through the discovery of science. So the vehicle of flesh, the human body, is now nothing more than an electric vortex governed by consciousness. So each tangible body is a bundle of concentrated energy. Matter is transformed into energy, and energy disappears to give away to matter. So, as Marcia said in the beginning during the introduction, so the scientists raised to the status of investigators of truth, chemists, physicists, geometricians, mathematicians, and so on, have become priests of the spirit without desiring it. Due to their ongoing studies, materialism and atheism will be compelled to vanish for lack of matter. The base that had endured their negativistic speculations will be gone. Laboratories are temples in which intelligence is driven to serve God. Personally, to me, that's a very interesting topic because many people consider that they see an antagonism between religion and science. However, in Spiritism, we see that they walk hand in hand. Science is not against God. Science reveals God with its discoveries, more and more getting closer and closer to God. So, as I was saying, these laboratories, they become temples in which the intelligence is driven to serve God, even when the intellectual activity is misguided, temporarily subordinated to political hegemony that generate wars. So the progress of science and divine conquest continues to exalt the good and is bound for glorious future. That future belongs to the spirit. On this slide, we like to show what we know nowadays about radiating energy. So we can see the electromagnetic diagram showing to the left, you have higher frequency, and to the right, you have lower frequencies, and also have your wavelengths. So, and in our spectrum, we know there is a portion of the spectrum that's used for radio, another portion for microwaves and infrared, X-rays, gamma rays, ultraviolet, and so on. And look how interesting that is. Pay attention to the portion that we humans can see, the portion that our eyes can see. It's a small slice of the entire spectrum. So most humans, that's all we can see, a small portion of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So on the spiritual side, when we talk about radiated energy, the first thing that comes to mind is what we call universal cosmic fluid. What is universal cosmic fluid? It is the most primitive matter or elementary matter. So it is the matter that's the first matter created by God, and from there derives all the other matters. So also at the time, the word used was fluid, At that time, there was the word energy did not exist yet. They even called electricity electric fluid. They called magnetism magnetic fluid. So that's why in the Spiritist books from Allan Kardec and so on, we see that that was the word used. But we can imagine that nowadays you could replace that word in your heads by the word energy or field, like electromagnetic field, as we know, right? And we can also think of universal cosmic fluid as a field, which is everywhere. So Allan Kardec in the book Genesis, Miracles and Predictions According to Spiritism, chapter 2, item 22, he comes with a analogy. He was an educator, so he would find ways to explain what was hard to explain, to make it easier. So he said, given how powerless humans are in comprehending the very essence of divinity, they can get only a close idea with the help of comparisons. They are necessarily highly imperfect, but which can at least show them what at first glance seems impossible. Let us imagine a fluid subtle enough to penetrate all objects. Now stop right there. As I mentioned earlier, you can replace that word, if you will, with word energy or field. Imagine electromagnetic field. A lot of people don't realize that we are the electromagnetic field is around us and within us everywhere, right? Wherever you have your cell phone carrier signal, that means you have electromagnetic field there, and we know that in many places they are present. In a way, we like to say, some carriers they have dead spots, but the carrier God have no spots because no no spots where you don't have coverage. There is coverage everywhere. So also your Wi-Fi. Many places we go nowadays, we have Wi-Fi in our home. We have Wi-Fi. That's electromagnetic field. So analogously, that's how we see the universal cosmic fluid. Being everywhere. And then Kardec comes also in the same book with a little bit more explanation about the universal cosmic fluid. And if you excuse me, I'll just read real quick this slide. He says, in essence, the state of etherization, the cosmic fluid is not uniform. Without ceasing to be ethereal, it undergoes modifications highly varied in kind and perhaps more numerous than in a state of tangible matter. So what he's trying to say is that you have that first primitive universal cosmic fluid, and then it suffers modifications. As an example, each planet will have a different universal cosmic fluid with different properties, if you will, because it has all the emanations of the civilizations that live in that planet. And continue on the second paragraph. Since everything is relative, these fluids have for spirits who are fluidic themselves an appearance as material as that of tangible objects for incarnates, and are for them what the substance of terrestrial would are for us. So would be for us. So what he's trying to say is that spiritual fluid, spiritual energies, or even universal cosmic fluid modified, those are very tangible to spirits. So to us, they're not. We can't see it. Most of us can't see it. However, it is there, right? Some can see some modifications. As an example, I recall a story of Chico Xavier. Once in the morning, he was going to the bus stop to catch his bus to go to work, and came this lady to talk to him. So there was a lady who saw him the night before. He used to work with Bezerra de Menezes, who was a discarnate doctor, and he used to do prescriptions, homeopathic prescriptions. So, and this lady, she couldn't understand the handwriting, and she wanted to ask him, and but he was in a hurry. He was running late. He said, "My friend, come at night tonight, and I'll spend the time with you, and I'll explain to you." And he wants to continue walking. And Emmanuel, which is the same that we spoke here in the first slide, he was his spiritual guide, appeared to him and told him, "Help her. She's in she needs help right now. So, and it's not going to take too long for you." And as a good student and disciple, he decided to go back. Chico decided to go back and talk to the lady. He explained to her what that all meant, and then she was happy. They went separate ways. He kept going to his bus stop, and Manuel appeared to him again and told him, "Stop, look back, look at that lady." So he saw something, a fluidic white energy coming from her and then towards his chest. It was good emanations, it was good energies that was coming to him because she was grateful for him. She was so grateful that those energies were being emanated by her towards him. So it's an explanation here as an example of, some people with some mediumistic um, possibilities. Some people can see these spiritual fluids, if you will. So basically thought and will are for spirits what hands are to humans. And Kardec explains that by means of thought, they impress upon fluids this or that direction. They agglomerate, combine, or disperse them. They form them in ensembles having a single appearance, shape, and certain coloration. They alter their properties as chemists alter gases or other substances, combining them according to certain laws. It is the great workshop or laboratory of the spirit life. So basically, with the thought and will, spirits can maneuver the spiritual fluids, if you will. So the analogy that I like to make always is when we look at our cars, maybe not the cars that are newer, but older models where you have a radio and you have two dials, one for the volume, another one to select your frequency, right? So selecting the frequency, you are on now making an analogy. You are deciding if you're going to emanate or connect with higher frequencies, or if you want to go into the lower frequencies, lower vibrations. Will is basically that volume. So, as an example, we can do a prayer, we can do a heartfelt prayer, which that's the most important lesson that Jesus taught us about prayer. What matters is that comes from the heart, not the amount of words that we're speaking, right? So you can have that heartfelt prayer. So I'm going to that high vibration, and also I'm putting that volume up there, so that will reach far away. Whereas I can do a prayer that I'm not really connected. Basically, my volume is down. I can be on the high vibration because prayer, my intention is to connect with the higher realm, higher spirits. But then because that prayer is not heartfelt, the volume is down. Imagine if I do prayer that are just coming from the lips, because it's possible to do prayers that you're just memorizing and just saying the words, but you're not feeling those words. Your volume is almost zero. So the will is almost lacking there. So that's what Kardec is trying to say here. Because remember, he's talking about spirits, but what are we? We are spirits. We are incarnate spirits. The difference between us and the so-called spirits is that we have a body at this time, temporarily, right? So Kardec continues. Again, this is Genesis chapter 14. The action of spirits upon the spiritual fluids has consequences of crucial and direct importance for incarnates. Since these fluids are the vehicle for thought, which can modify their properties, it is obvious that they must be impregnated with good or evil qualities of the thoughts that set them in motion. And they change according to the purity or impurity of sentiments. Evil thoughts corrupt the spiritual fluids just as harmful miasmas corrupt breathable air. The fluids that surround evil spirits or which are protected by them are therefore noxious, whereas those that receive the influence of good spirits are as pure as the spirit's degree of moral perfection allows. So he's coming to tell us that the spirits, they the properties of those fluids, they are going to be impregnated with good or evil. So one analogy that we like to do, think of smell. I can put in some matter, I can put a good smell or a bad smell, a good fragrance, or something that smells really bad, right? That's exactly what he's trying to say here, right? So, and if we go back, remembering the words of Emmanuel in the realms of mediumship, we need to realize that now more than ever, people see themselves as consciousnesses held amid forces and fluids that are temporarily combined for education purposes. So everyone now is starting to grasp the fact that grave is the door to renewal, just as the cradle is the access to human experience. And they realize that they stay here on the planet is a journey with a destiny aimed at the stages of greater progress. So we are here to progress. So, and on this great pilgrimage, we are all instruments of the forces which we are in tune. We are all mediums within our own mental field, associating ourselves with edifying energies when our thoughts flow towards the higher life, or with disturbing and depressing forces, as long as we're still enslaved to the shadows of primitive and tormented life. Through the sentiments that characterizes the inner life, all individuals emit specific rays and live within the spiritual wave which they identify themselves. As we made the analogy earlier with smell, all of us have a characteristic smell that we emanate. No wonder when they're hunting for someone or the police is searching for someone, they can use dogs smell clothing for that person, and they can pinpoint the person if the person is nearby, because each one of us, we emanate specific smell. In the same way, we emanate a specific thoughts that will put some characteristics on the fluid around us. So, in Allan Kardec, he makes this analogy in chapter 14 when he's talking about fluids, and he says that like odors, they are designated according to their properties, effects, and the original type. So he comes and tells us, he puts these two lists. So one from the moral perspective and the other from the physical perspective. So basically, he comes and say that from moral point of view, these fluids bear the mark of sentiments of hate, envy, jealousy, pride, selfishness, violence, hypocrisy, goodness, benevolence, love, charity, tenderness. And those are just examples, right? And they have the three dots at the end just to say it's a very long list. And that's from a moral perspective. From a physical perspective, they can be exciting, calming, penetrating, acerbic, irritating, soothing, soporific, narcotic, toxic, reparatory, expelling, and so on. No wonder there are times that we have sensations, physical sensations, and for example, can be a little irritated, but then there is no real reason for that. There was no discussion per se, or I can feel toxic. Um, I can feel toxic in my body. Sometimes it's because of what other people are saying, or sometimes could be because of thoughts that I'm having, and with whom I'm having affinity at that time, with which kind of spirit I'm connecting, because they're going to connect with those that have the same type of thoughts. Um, and Emmanuel in the book also says that these truths cannot remain semi-hidden in our sanctuaries of faith. They radiate from the temples of science like mathematical equations. And it's interesting that nowadays science has been conducting study and finding out that, for example, someone holding grudge for something that happened a long time ago, um, they may start developing some diseases, could be mental or physical. But once they can forgive, they feel in light, and they feel light in a sense, not heavy, and they start getting their health start getting back on track. So in the book, On the Way to the World of Regeneration, which was just published 12, 13 months ago, was December 2020. There is a lot of information about the pandemic, as an example. So this book is from Divaldo Franco with the spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. And Manuel Filomeno, at the end of chapter 1, he says, when human beings understand that the world is made of resonances, their thoughts and conduct will obey different selective criteria. So if I know that I'm having certain bad thoughts and that I am attuning with people and spirits having about the same thoughts, and maybe that's not something I want for myself. So I'm going to push myself to get away from those thoughts and replace those thoughts with some other different thoughts. I can tell you that some of us spiritists, because we have the knowledge, we do that. Sometimes come bad thoughts, and we try to think of something else, or even mentally say something to ourselves, for us to get away from that. Um, this book also, just as a FYI, this book also mentions vaccine, which talking about the pandemic. And it was interesting to me because it refers many times, it called it life-saving vaccine. So to me, it was very interesting that. Um, and also, as far as going back to the consequences of our thoughts, to remember prayer as a powerful tool, because with prayer we're connecting with higher order spirits. So if I'm having some low order thoughts, if you will, and I want to get away, sometimes a prayer, sometimes it happens that something happens to irritate us, and you get so irritated. But imagine you have to do some important work, especially helping someone, right? Helping someone uh, physically or mentally. Let's say you're supposed to call someone to help console them, and then something happens, and basically trying to distract you, and you're getting irritated, and you need to keep your composure in order to go and console someone else. So one of the tools that can be used at that time, at that very moment, is a prayer, because then we might be connecting with lower order spirits, and with the prayer, we're going into the higher orders and disconnecting from the low order spirits. In the book Missionaries of the Light, also from André Luiz, the instructor Alexandre says, just as the physical body can ingest poisonous foods that intoxicate its tissues, the pure spiritual body can also absorb degenerative elements that corrode its energy centers, with repercussions on the material cells. So basically, what he's saying here in an analogous way, we can eat or drink things that will intoxicate our bodies, our physical bodies. And it works the same way on the spiritual side, because I can, with my thoughts, for example, intoxicate, my spirit is intoxicated, and then intoxicating the perispirit, which is the intermediary to the body. And we're gonna get there here on the next image, right? So if I'm intoxicating my spirit with bad thoughts, they can, if they're long enough, bad enough, they can intoxicate the perispirit and impact the physical body. So that's why it's in psychology, sometimes they refer to this as somatization, because we're getting mental state, and that's coming in realization in the physical body, right? What they still don't know, it's, the mental or the mind is in the spirit. But basically, those thoughts that we have can cause disease in our body. In fact, Alexandre, in chapter 4 of the same book, he affirms a sick body almost always indicates a diseased mind. He mentions on that, we have that chart on the lower left, that actions produce effects, sentiments generate creations, and thoughts give rise to forms and consequences in infinitely different ways. So, because each one of us represent a universe in and of itself, we are responsible for the energies that we emit to circulate in the currents of life. So we're totally responsible for the energies that we're sending out. Now, if we go back to the basic works, the Spirits book by Allan Kardec, which was the first book published in 1857. In the subchapter, The Concealed Influence of Spirits on Our Thoughts and Actions, he asked the question, and we like to say that any question we have, tell you Kardec very likely asked that question, maybe in a different way, but he asked so many questions that very likely we can find the answer to the questions we have about life and the universe. So he asked this question number 459. Do spirits have any influence on our thoughts and actions? The answer, their influence on you in this regard is greater than you suppose, for very frequently it is they who guide you. Now, it could be lower order spirits or higher order spirits. But basically, this answer confirms another affirmation that we see in the medium's book. And this, basically, in this planet, in our evolutionary state, we are all mediums. Meaning to say that we can have interchange with the spiritual world. Not all of us have a conscious interchange, if you. Not all of us have physical effects where, like, someone can speak, which is a spirit speaking through a person, or can write, but all of us are exchanging thoughts with spirits. And as it was answered, most of the time, very frequently they're guiding us maybe to go one way, maybe to go another way. And remember, one thing that's very consoling is that each one of us have a spiritual mentor, has been assigned for life, for this life. We have a spiritual mentor. And some of us learned that not only that, we also have familiar spirits. So spirits that we have been together in previous incarnations. So they're part of our family and they love us. So they're also there to help. Think of familiar spirits sometimes as an assistance to the mentor. So we have some of these spirits that can get to that status to go and help us. Or if they can't, at least some of them are there cheering for us to be successful on this journey. Because before incarnating, we kind of agree to a contract. So we have a journey, and we have this has been planned, and we have milestones to hit. We're going to try to hit them. Even though in that book, Missionaries of Light, that we mentioned earlier, um, Alexandre at some point he mentioned the word completers. Oh, these are the completers. Completers. And Andrea Luiz asked, what do you mean, completers? Oh, these are people, these spirits, they completed they check every milestone they had in their incarnation. So they're coming here with 100% of their mission completed. And of course, Andrea Luiz asked the question that you're thinking right now. Alexandre, on average, how do people get here? What's their status? And basically, on average, he said it's 30 to 50%. So on average, we achieve 30 to 50% to what we have committed. So personally, I always say my goal is to be above that 50%. That's already good. That's above average. I mean, if someone wants to aim for 100%, please do so and work hard. So, but on this question, Kardec came to make it very clear that we are exchanging communication. Sometimes it's an intuition that we get. Sometimes it's an inspiration that we receive to go one way or the other, or to do one thing or another. And also, again, it can be a bad suggestion, or it can be a good suggestion for us. So, towards the end, Emmanuel says, to each medium, or we can read, to each person, his or her own mind. To each mind, its own rays, personalizing observations and interpretations. According to the rays we emit, our own spiritual dwelling will rise within the wave of thoughts preferred by our souls. So basically, as we mentioned about the odor or the smell, it happens the same on the spiritual realm. If on average, let's say, we have a good friend that's working with us today, he likes a specific soccer team. He's, as just an example, and he's thinking about this team. Of course, his emanations will have some portion that is dedicated to his thoughts about that team. Or if his thoughts nowadays, he spends a lot of time thinking about how to take care of his kids, about the future of his kids. That's going to reflect on his psychosphere, if you will, which is his psychic or spiritual atmosphere around him. So it's basically the characteristics of that person. So as we have that machine at the airport nowadays, we used to have the X-ray machine. Now there is the other one that does so much. They check us on the spiritual realm. Basically, with goggles, they can see everything about us, morally speaking, if you will. Right? That's a reflection of the type of thoughts we have on a daily basis. So if you want to know what someone really are, we can see what they typically think about, and that's of course going to reflect on their feelings, on their sentiments, and on their actions, and it's going to reflect also with whom they're going to relate. In the same way that in a incarnate between incarnates, we relate with folks that are similar to us. It's common, right? As that example of a friend cheers for a certain soccer team, of course he's going to watch the game and he's going to have friends that are cheering for the same team. Like on average, he may be nice enough to invite someone who's supporting the other team, but he's going to have relationship with people that supports the same gene. Some of us, when we become parents, we start developing deeper relationships with people that have kids about the same age as our kids, because we want to exchange information. So then we have an affinity with those people. So as Brazilians, as an example, we have affinity with Brazilians. And depending on the state, you're going to have affinity with someone that's from your state. Or as Americans overseas, we have observed you're on a trip, you're overseas, and a couple Americans meet each other. Oh yeah, so yeah, where we're from? Then it start talking. So there is some affinity there because they have something in common. So the same thing happens between incarnate spirit, or called soul, as defined by Allan Kardec in the introduction of the Spirits book, and spirits per se. So between souls and spirit, and of course between spirits themselves on the spirit realm. So that affinity is what attracts them. Like sometimes I meet someone, and for the first time, either sometimes I have a good impression. Some people say I felt a good vibe, or a bad first impression, but impression from an energetic energy field, if you will. And we don't know how to explain. We don't know how to explain. I mean, we on our daily lives, Spiritism explains this, but for most people, they can't explain. For some reason, I like that person, or for some reason, I dislike that person. That is because there is affinity there, or there isn't affinity there. It could be something that was past in previous lives, and now is flourishing. Because if they did something that was not good for each other, of course, when they meet, they're going to feel that energy, even though they don't remember the past incarnations, but in their subconscious, it's there, and as a spirit, it's there, right? So, in essence, Emmanuel was trying to say here that is the same as repeating, to each according to his deeds, to each according to his thoughts. Again, he wrote this October 3rd, 1954, exactly 150 years from Allan Kardec's birth. So to me, that's an enigma. If someone wants to study, research, and let us know, please do so. So once again, thank you for the time. Marcia, I think now we're going to go to Q&A.
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to see such a great discussion, right? And wanted to remind everyone, this is our time for us to discuss. And we are open for your questions and comments. And let's see if we have any here. So, hi, Kristen. Kristen says, John, is there anything one can do to clear out or cleanse corrupt spiritual fluids? And those are quote unquote questions there.
The first that comes to mind is through prayer. Through prayer. As even Allan Kardec mentions in chapter 23 of Genesis, it's obsession. It says it's one way to help someone who's going through an obsession. As an example, can you imagine, can you think of worst corrupt spiritual fluids around us when we have a terrible obsession? So prayer is the first one that comes to mind. The other one is with our good deeds, good behavior, because at the end of the day, I'm being faithful when I'm aligned with God, when my actions reflect the teachings that Jesus brought to us. So also through our actions, in my mind, those are the two first things that come to mind to cleanse. Corrupt.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this is great. So prayer and good deeds. So Kirsten follows up with, can only the person who has the corrupt spiritual fluids, again, under quotation, cleanse or clear out their own corrupt fluids, or must we employ the help of others? Good questions, Christian. Very controversial.
Great
Go ahead,
question.
John.
But I think the answer is in the previous one as well, right? Because can only person has to cleanse or clear their own. So they can use the help, which prayer. And I can tell you personally, and some other friends, sometimes when we feel situation is not doing well, or we sense that maybe something spiritually is influencing the situation, besides doing prayer, we ask others. Sometimes we send a message, say, please pray for me. I need prayers. And um, I know highly sensitive mediums that even have
Mhm.
said that felt, right. So you're in your home on the other side of town and you're praying, and that is reaching the person. The person is feeling that prayer.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's amazing. So
Yes, it
let's see if we
is.
have another question here. Daniel, hi Daniel. Daniel said, "Thank you, John. Could you elaborate about mind versus thoughts? Are they the same?"
So the first thing that came to mind is when you look at the cellular system, cellular network, you have
Hmm.
the base station, quote unquote, people call it towers. So that's would be analogous to mind, is the generator of those electromagnetic waves. So the same thing, our mind is the generator of thoughts. So mind generate the thoughts, and that they're not the same.
I love your analogies, John. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So let's see. I hope, Daniel, that this makes sense. It makes complete sense to me. So thank you. So the Spiritist Network sent this interesting question now. Your analogy between the quality of prayers and radio buttons for frequency and volume is interesting. Can you discuss how to increase the volume of our prayers? And I think it seems that prayer is a theme, right, on the question. So, John, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and it's very good to me at this, especially at this time of pandemic. It's a powerful tool that we have in our hands. It's free. You can do it anywhere.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a self-healing tool, if you will, right? So discuss how to increase the volume of our prayers. So number one, scientifically, um, it's been shown that when we close our eyes during our prayers, there is more activity in our frontal cortex. So it's an indication that we are increasing the volume. We're better connecting. And in fact, I think some of us can tell that it is way harder to do a prayer with open eyes, right? That's one. The other one is really focus on the words, focus on the feeling, on the sentiments and the words. Um, because sometimes we can do a prayer, but we're thinking about the next thing, right? So as an example, I had a habit, and to me it's always one thing that's important about prayer are triggers, like to do our daily prayers. So
Hmm.
create triggers because it reminds you. So before the pandemic, I had a trigger that I knew wasn't perfect. A trigger was parking at the company parking lot, like going to work. And because I worked 5 days a week and not seven, so typically I remember in the morning I had this issue, like to remind myself to do the morning prayer. So, but then I could be there in the car. Imagine if I'm there and I'm already thinking about, I'm getting out of the car, I'm getting to the elevator, I'm going there, I have this meeting. So that's why to me focus, it's important to say, okay, I'm going to do this prayer and it's going to be a minute or 2 minutes, right? It can be longer if you have more time. Sheikh Xavier used to do 40 minutes, right? But what's important for us in our state is just to do it. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to do this, put my phone on do not disturb. It might be only 2 minutes, but you never know, a message may come and there you go, you get distracted and your volume goes down. So to me, focus. That's the other one. Close the eyes. Closing eyes again help you focus and feel the words. Like um, we have a relative that came to our spirit center many times, and she used to ask, "Why don't you do the Lord's Prayer?" So, and I explained that in Spiritism, we learn what's important are the words that are coming out of our hearts. It's harder to do a memorized prayer, and the Lord's Prayer will be memorized, but you can do it as long as you feel the words. And there are so many teachings in that prayer that coincides with Spiritist teachings that are so beautiful.
Love it. Thank you, John. I think if I may say here, just before we go to Kirsten, is someone once told me, and it's just an amazing, simple, faster perhaps than your trigger to do it in the car. So, but I love it, and it made me remind me of this advice when you're about to go to work, when you're about to whatever, go from one place to another, just visualize yourself holding hands with Jesus. And it was just such a quick way. And I remember, especially when you start a new job, a new place, a new location, and you just you're walking and you see yourself holding hands, right? And as you can see, I'm closing my eyes, and it transformed that how your mind and your thoughts and your prayer, your connection for the rest of the day. So love it, love it. So let's see what Kirsten's question said. So Krishna said, is there a time frame from when one feels or has negative thoughts and it imprints on the spiritual fluids and then manifests within the physical body? Is it simultaneously or does it take a week? Can you
I don't.
answer that?
As someone from science, I don't have the data itself, but we we know it depends on how long you keep having those thoughts, right? So if I keep having um, certain thoughts, it can imprint to my spiritual fluid and then manifest in the physical body. So to me, being repetitive and being long enough. So maybe someone that has high sensitivity could be faster, but I can think in terms of months or years for the average person, right?
It's what we call ideation, right? Or obsessive fixed ideas. So all of those terms can be used. That repetitive, compulsive way of honing in, and that can imprint ourselves as well. I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
and
Yeah.
we can use this to our advantage. We can do the opposite.
Yes. Yes.
And Givaldo Franco teaches us. He talks to his organs, and so if
Mm.
I'm not mistaken, the Daniel that says that we could talk to ourselves, right? Givaldo Franco had a problem with organ. I can't remember if it was the pancreas and he was talking to this organ to help heal,
I
right?
love it. I love it. Yeah. So let's see if we have another question. We have a few more minutes. Freddie, hi, Freddie. He's saying, good morning. So telepathy will be part of fluid or waves coming to us via the universal fluid?
Yes. So telepathy is thought, right? So everything we're talking about here is thought. Even prayer is thought. And the way the media for thought is universal cosmic fluid. And remember, universal cosmic fluid is everywhere. So in the same way that some of you now are seeing me through the internet and the signal is getting to your home via a coaxial cable or getting to your home via a fiber cable, right? Or via cellular network or via Wi-Fi. So those are all medias, right? Specifically those cables that I mentioned earlier. So again, the difference, I always say God's carrier is universal. It's everywhere. There are no bad spots in his carrier. And when I studied more deeply that chapter 2 of Genesis,
Mhm.
which is entitled God, um, it made me understand the concept that God is everywhere because it's through the universal cosmic fluid that he's everywhere. So the right question sometimes is not, does God know what I had for breakfast? The right question or the answer is, God is in the breakfast because the universal cosmic fluid is everywhere. So it's not, we need to forget the concept oh, it's heaven, right? So God is there and I'm here. No, God is everywhere through the universal cosmic fluid, which is
Yeah.
media for our thoughts.
Yes, yes. I love the technological references, right? We can really go into that for a long time because it explains a lot of those very, very abstract thoughts. But I love the idea that very simplistically, God is in your breakfast. God is in us. We are in God, right? So it's mind blowing. But anyways, let's see if we have another question. Yes, we have from the Spiritist Federation. You mentioned Spiritism does not see religion and science as antagonistic to each other. Would you mind speaking a little bit more about it? Is Spiritism a religion? And if so, why is it not against scientific progress?
Um, so, if I'm not mistaken, chapter 4 of Genesis, according to Spiritism, is entitled The Role of Science in Spiritism. And even explains that Spiritism had to come at the right time. You needed
Mhm.
certain science to exist to do some discoveries, such as geology. Geology had to come and do discoveries to tell us that there was a time that the entire earth was underwater. And that's why nowadays you can go into a mountain and have discoveries of fish fossils, right? Not what some other people would believe that was to the time of Noah's Ark, the entire earth was underwater. No, it's through what we learned through geology that there was a time and it predates humans on Earth. As that's just an example, and many other sciences. And as you mentioned, Marcia, um, at the time of Kardec, we didn't have the studies of electromagnetism, which is actually interesting. If I'm not mistaken, James Maxwell wrote the electromagnetic formulas 2 years after Kardec published the Spirit's book. So they were living about the same time. One in England, the other one in France. But so electromagnetism was not as known. But you see how much it's easier nowadays to explain thought, making analogies with electromagnetism. That's part of our lives. I mean, everyone
Mhm.
has cell phone signal, has Wi-Fi around them, and many other. The microwave oven, that's another one that has electromagnetism in it, right? So science it helps the Spiritism explain its concepts. In fact, there
Mhm.
are many concepts that came, for example, through André Luiz, that were later confirmed by science. For example, DNA, if I'm not mistaken, took 30 or 40 years for science to discover the DNA, which André Luiz had written about it 30 or 40 years earlier. And there are many other discoveries. Folk scientists that are more on this field, health, they estimate that would take about 100 years for science to confirm some information that we have through Spiritist literature. See, science is the partner. And again, like we said earlier, science discovers the truth. And again, we need to realize science works in different ways. You have theory and you have
Mhm.
experiment. So, for example, in 1916, Einstein wrote a theory about gravitational waves. 1916. So it was a theory. You can't start walking around and say, "Oh, they exist." It's a theory. And then exactly 100 years later, in 2016, there was an experiment done here in the U.S. that proved that gravitational waves exist. So it took about 100 years for that to be experimented and proven. So science discovers nature, how nature works. And nature is the work of God. So science, it's working for God. It's working
Oh, love it.
review,
Yeah.
to review God, to review the wonders. Boson Higgs, for example, boson Higgs particle it's not universal cosmic fluid yet, but it's getting close because it's getting to a point where it's finding out that there is one particle, there is one matter, quote unquote, that's everywhere, right? Which we know there is universal cosmic fluid everywhere. But to me, the boson Higgs, it's in that direction of one day discovering the universal cosmic fluid. And
Absolutely.
one last
Fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, go ahead.
last thing, because it's a spiritist religion. Personally, I prefer the definition that the Spiritism is that three in one. Spiritism has three aspects, right?
Hmm.
Philosophical aspect, moral, ethical, or religious aspect, if you want to call that, and the scientific aspect. To me, if we focus in only on one, it's like having a three-legged stool when you're removing the other leg. So if I remove the ethical, moral, or religious aspect, then I'm going to fall, right? If, let's say, for example, I heard sometimes the stories of people being asked to do a lecture, not speak about Jesus. You can't, I mean, if that lecture was about Jesus, even this lecture, right? I had the phrase from Jesus, even though it's more scientific. It's you can't do that. You can't remove one of the legs of this stool, right? So you have the philosophical, the scientific, and ethic, moral, or religious.
Hmm. Yeah, it's truly interwoven because a lot of the discussions that we had here is quite philosophical in nature, right? So
Yes,
thank you, John,
I like
for bringing that.
yeah, I like to look at Jesus like in the introduction of Jesus in the Home book from Neo
Hmm.
Lucio through
Hmm.
Chico Xavier. They also have it's beautiful because exactly talk about the perspective that people have about Jesus. Like historians, they see him.
Hmm.
Well, he changed history, right? That is before and after. Philosophers, but to me, I like to say Jesus. He is the most perfect spirit that has been on earth with us. So he's not only maybe the best priest, but he's the best architect, the best engineer,
Yes.
the best doctor, he's the best every profession we can think, and the best geologist. He has all the knowledge because he presided the formation of this planet. Imagine how much scientific knowledge you need to have in order to put together a planet and beautiful planet, right? I think all of us agree. Beautiful planet. Very soon it's going to be even more beautiful to some of us with spring, right? And
Hmm.
leaving the cold weather behind us.
And putting my head not as a scientist or engineer, but as a project manager, the right sequence, right? You mentioned some of the things had to come with time. Our understanding, scientific thoughts come with time for us to truly understand some of the more abstract concepts that were even given to us already. So awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Can I say
go
one more
ahead.
thing? Because I'm
Yes.
looking at that question. There are so many. Just one last thing. Why is it not against? Why is it not against scientific progress? Just made
Hmm.
me remember that I think in chapter 1 of Genesis, according to Spiritism, Allan Kardec wrote, and not don't remember exact words, but he said what he wrote there is, the Spiritism and science walk hand in hand. But if
Hmm.
one day science proves something wrong in the Spiritist literature, follow science. That's it.
Yeah, and I may also, for all of us who are here, just remind ourselves that um, mid 19th century, right? A lot of discussions were found regarding what is religion. And I think there's also a connotation there. Just the word religion needs to, and you mentioned this, John. You said, the moral aspects, not, and that is called religion. And I think if we talk about religion as that connection to God, absolutely. If we talk about religion as I may offend you, but really very high level, hierarchical, dogmatic, right? Very much the religion that we keep thinking maybe from many centuries ago. Then it is not. So I think it's very interesting for us to also understand the word. Is it a religion? Yes, it is. But as it exemplifies our connection, our God within us, like you said, it's everywhere, including in us and us in them and in it in God. But anyways, let's. I think we have another question, and maybe it may be our last one. So let's see. U.S. Spiritus Federation said, "Can you explain the difference between affinity and resonance?"
Um, I'll start with resonance. That's easier for me. Resonance, physically speaking,
Hmm.
is when
Hmm.
you have two. generators of frequency that are on the same frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, for example, in with microphones, sometimes you hear
Mm-hmm.
that high frequency loud noise. It's
Mm-hmm.
because they were resonating, right? Um, Affinity, we can think of chemistry, but also thinking of
Mm-hmm.
spirits or people is when we think alike, right? We think alike. We have things are common, so we're going to have affinity. Again, also comes from chemistry, where they can have, I think it was called covalent um, connections. See, I don't remember much about chemistry, but trying to go all the way back there. So they were sharing electrons, right? Um, but yeah, no, they're in a way they're similar, because I know in, like, we can say in Portuguese or in English, that resonates with me. It's something that I like. But just
Mm-hmm.
physically, is that both are in the same frequency. That's what resonance means. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, they're very similar. But the word that's more used to say that people are um, um, they kind of like each other. Can't find a better term. They have affinity, right? Because there is
Mm-hmm.
affinity between them, and they sometimes people they work together. I can tell you an example. Later today, there is a class that needs to happen, and the person who was supposed to be the facilitator won't be able to do that, and asked me to to substitute. I said, okay, I can do this, and it's the last class, and
Mm-hmm.
I asked someone to join me, someone that I have affinity. And some people have seen us doing a lecture once. I think we did it once. They asked, "Did you guys rehearse?" No, we didn't rehearse. We barely talked to each other before the lecture. So because of that, of all of that affinity, because of the friendship that we already have.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your explanation. It really makes sense to me, right? And I hope it makes sense to everyone else. I think we're at the end, John. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone else. It's awesome to have you here, right? And we are, as we say, we meet every Saturday, and this is just the last in January of this year of our um, weekly Spiritist Talk series. Next Saturday, I have to be very proud, because next Saturday, which is the 5th of February at 11 a.m. Eastern, please don't miss me. I will be speaking, and it's a really interesting discussion. If you don't mind, is very, to me, very delightful topic. It's found in Luke, it's found in Matthew, but it's also the 24th chapter of the title, the 24th chapter of the Gospel according to Spiritism. Do not hide the light under a bushel. So hope you can meet me here next week. And I want to also take this time, John. I would ask you to close today's with a prayer. But before we get there, I am also very, very, very excited to announce that the United States Spiritist Federation has just released this amazing class. It's a virtual course, Initiation to Spiritism, and it is delivered every week. There's no charge, it's free, and it's really meant for anyone who would like to learn or even review the basic principles of Spiritism as it was explained by Kardec in 1857. So it is, just to, in a nutshell, it is self-paced, right? It's composed of 30 lessons and 8 interactive Q&A. I'd love to see that. And they will be released week by week on Sundays. So tomorrow, if you can, please go to the www.spiritist.us, and you can visit the course page of that website to receive the reminders and also get to the content. It is Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So tomorrow. So thank you so much, John. And I would like to end this talk today with gratitude, and especially understand that you can speak with a loud volume a prayer for all of us.
Took me 1 second to realize what you meant. Loud volume. Okay, let's do that. Let's connect to the higher realms, higher frequencies. Let's close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to God, thanking Him for our health, thanking Him for our friends, for our families, thanking for the environment of our homes, and asking Him to protect each one of us, to bless our family's friends, to emanate His love, His light throughout our homes, where most of us are spending our times nowadays during this pandemic. We ask you, God, to please emanate your love to everyone, to all of those that are inside our homes, discarnates or incarnates, and those that might be outside as well. We ask that you bless all of those that are watching this lecture today. Also bless those that watch at a later time. Bless all the doctors, all the scientists, all the nurses that are working hard during this pandemic to help us, to keep us safe. Bless the politicians that are leading each country. Bless our neighborhoods. Bless our cities. Bless everyone and be with us today and always. So be it.
So be it. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.